You've probably heard someone say it. Rental properties are the key to financial freedom. But lately, more and more creators are popping up with a different message. I bought a bunch of rentals and now I regret it.
Owning 22 rental properties looks great on social media, but in real life, it sucks.
Whoa, that's a strong statement. And if you're a new investor or thinking about getting into real estate, it probably makes you pause. But before you walk away from rentals altogether, let's take a closer look at what's really going on here. The specific video in question that seems to have started this trend was posted by Stefanie Kebede about 5 months ago, and as of the date of this recording, it has racked up over 700,000 views. If you watch her full video, and I highly encourage you to do so if you haven't already, you'll see that she doesn't regret buying rental properties in general. What she actually regrets, even if only subconsciously, is buying the wrong rental properties. With the wrong math, using the wrong strategy, and scaling way too fast without a safety net. In this video, I'm going to break down everything she said, point by point, and show you where her logic, her analysis, and her expectations fall apart. And more importantly, I'll show you how to avoid making the same mistakes so your investing journey leads to freedom and not frustration. Let's get into it. Let's start with the first reason this investor says she regrets buying rental properties.
The 22 units that I own with my business partner, we roughly cash flow on an average of $600 per month, and that's per unit. And on a monthly basis, that comes to $13,200. And on an annual basis, each year, that comes to $158,400. The six figures that you see that we make from all these properties isn't really six figures, because as you buy more and you scale, more of that money of that cash flow that you make just goes into buying more properties. And not only that, you have to remember you're dealing with properties and things happen. So a roof could go out, an HVAC system could go out, windows could need to be replaced, and those are some pricey items. And that starts to add up.
All right, let's unpack what's really going on here. She's saying we make over $150,000 a year in cash flow from our 22 properties. We don't actually get to keep that money. It all just goes back into buying more properties. There are actually two issues with this statement. First, she's clearly confusing gross income and cash flow. Cash flow is what's left over after expenses. Mortgage, taxes, repairs, vacancies, reserves, everything. Gross income is just the rent you collect. These are not interchangeable terms, but she floats between them as if they are. That kind of confusion leads new investors to make bad assumptions when analyzing deals, and it usually results in poor buying decisions, disappointment, or both. Second, she's treating reinvesting her cash flow as if it somehow negates the value of the cash flow. But of course, that makes no sense. If you choose to reinvest the money your properties generate, that's a capital allocation decision. It doesn't mean the properties didn't produce real income. It just means you use that income to grow faster. It's like saying, I regret making money at my job because I contributed it all to my 401k. That's not a problem with your job. It's a budgeting choice. So when someone says they regret buying rental properties because they didn't feel like they had the cash flow, what they're really saying is that they didn't plan for liquidity, or they didn't understand their own strategy. That's not a reason to avoid rental properties. That's a reason to slow down, educate yourself, and build a strategy that aligns with your financial goals. Now let's talk about her next reason for regretting rental property investing: unexpected expenses.
Think about it. Let's say you own a single family house and you decide to rent it out and you cash flow $400 per month. That's great. That's above average because typical investors look to cash flow roughly $200 a month. So you're making $400 a month just from this one property. Now, let's say your roof goes out, and to buy a new roof, that costs $5,000. All your cash flow of that $400 per month is completely wiped out just because of that one thing, just because you have to pay for that roof.
Okay, so she's saying that even if you think you're making solid monthly cash flow on a rental, it can all be destroyed by one major repair, like a roof replacement. Here's the problem. She's acting like things like replacing roofs, HVACs, and windows are surprises. They're not. Every one of those items has a known useful life. Roofs last 20 to 30 years. Furnaces go bad in 10 to 15 years. The useful lifespan of windows varies by window type and material used, but it's definitely finite and predictable. Replacing rental property components is not an unexpected expense. It's literally one of the most expected parts of owning real estate. There's a name for this kind of spending. It's called capital expenditures, or CapEx. CapEx is one of the most standard, well-known categories of expenses that must be factored into any rental property analysis. In fact, here are the common categories that must be subtracted from gross income to arrive at true cash flow: mortgage, property taxes, insurance, utilities, water, sewer, garbage, repairs and maintenance, vacancy reserves, capital expenditures, legal fees, accounting fees, and depending on the property, there may be others like snow removal, lawn care, pest control, or HOA fees. So when she says that one big repair wiped out her cash flow, what she's really saying is, I didn't properly budget for repairs or CapEx. I thought cash flow meant leftover rent after the mortgage. And unfortunately, that kind of thinking leads people to buy deals that look good on paper, but only because the paper left out half of the expenses. That's why she's regretting her portfolio now. It's not because rental properties don't cash flow. It's because she bought properties that never actually did. She just didn't realize it at the time. And that's the real danger of not knowing how to analyze a deal properly. If you want to go deeper into how to analyze rental properties properly, including calculating the actual cash flow, cash-on-cash return, and understanding how to use the internal rate of return in your analysis, I'll put links in the description to dedicated videos I did on each of these metrics. Now, let's talk about one of the more relatable reasons she gives for regretting buying her rental properties, and that is the emotional side of being equity rich but cash poor.
Throughout us buying all these rental properties within an 18-month time frame, I quickly realized that we were becoming equity rich but cash poor. And having a lot of equity is great, but equity does not put gas in my tank for me to be able to drive to the office and drive to appointments. I don't like living a life having to constantly check if my bank account is in the negatives or not. I just got tired of it, honestly. And with you being equity rich and cash poor and not having enough in your bank account, you have to think of those things like, are you gonna have enough money for food? Are you gonna have enough money to have gas? Are you gonna have enough money for just the regular bills in your life? And that's where I just got over it. You know, I was just tired of living a life like that and just came to this realization where I just regret building and scaling this fast.
That's a very real feeling, and I get it. Owning a bunch of properties on paper can look like you've made it. When the bank account is near zero and the bills are coming in, that paper wealth doesn't help much. Still, we need to zoom in on why this happens. Again, this is not a problem with owning rental properties. It's a problem of 1, incomplete financial analysis up front, and 2, lack of strategic planning to unlock that equity. Let's start with the analysis. If she had bought true cash flowing properties with enough margin above expenses to allow flexibility, then she would have had options. With enough rental income to support higher loan payments, she could have done a cash-out refinance to tap into that trapped equity without selling. Instead, it sounds like she bought properties that look good, maybe because of the purchase price or the appreciation potential, but didn't actually perform well enough to support that next move. Now, let's talk strategy. There are, in fact, creative ways to unlock equity that don't involve selling properties. One tactic I've used many times is called parcel hacking. Here's how it works. If you're buying more than one property at the same time from the same seller, which it sounds like she did for at least a few of her rentals, you can structure your contracts so that most of the financing is loaded onto one property while another is left largely unencumbered. Later, you can do a cash-out refinance on the property you sheltered from the initial financing and pull equity out of the deal that way. I made a full video on that strategy, and I'll drop the link in the description if you want to check it out. Another strategy is the BRRRR method, using private financing. In one deal, my business partner and I bought a 10-unit property for $475,000, all in using none of our own money. 2 years later, after renovations and stabilizing the rents, it appraised for $1.15 million. The link to that video with the full breakdown of how we did it is also in the description below, and you can check it out if you want to. But the result was that we refinanced and pulled out $720,000, putting over $100,000 tax-free into each of our pockets, and the property still cash flowed over $2,600 per month after the refinance. That's what happens when the deal is structured properly from the start. That's real equity creation and real cash flow. So the real issue here isn't that she had equity and couldn't access it. It's that the property she bought didn't cash flow well enough to create any flexibility, and she didn't position herself to unlock the equity when she needed it. Once again, that's not a reason to regret buying rentals. That's a reason to learn the strategies that make them actually work. The next reason she gives for regretting her rental properties is that she didn't have a consistent income stream to fall back on, especially when things went wrong.
You need another source of income just to help you sustain. Because as I just said, you will be equity rich and cash poor if you do it this way and just build and scale so fast. So that other source of income that we took into consideration was wholesale deals. But unfortunately for us, our wholesale deals were very, very inconsistent. So we weren't making really any money from that. It was just the money from our cash flow. But you gotta think about it. For us, there were some things that did need repaired. And when we had no money coming from wholesale deals, then we would use our cash flow money. But when we were low and didn't even have cash flow money to use that, then we would have to come out of our own pocket. And guys, remember I told you being cash poor and not having any money in the bank account? You're probably wondering, like, how are you gonna pay for repairs if you have no money from your personal pocket? Well, the bad thing we've done that I don't recommend is we just put it on credit cards. And that's where you get into a hole.
All right, so she's saying that they tried to supplement their rental income with wholesaling. But when that didn't bring in steady money, they had to dip into personal savings, or worse, rely on credit cards. Again, let's be real, this is not a rental property problem. This is a cash flow planning problem. If you want to go full-time as a real estate investor before your rental income can actually support your personal living expenses, then yes, you're going to need some other source of income like wholesaling, flipping, or acting as a real estate agent. But here's the thing, those types of income are usually high effort and high variability. They're not as consistent or predictable as a W-2 job. And that's the real takeaway here. If you have a stable job with benefits, don't quit it until your investment income reliably covers your basic living expenses. I didn't. I worked as an associate attorney at a private law firm for 9 years while building up my portfolio. And let me stop you before you start yelling, "Oh, you're just a rich lawyer, give me a break." I wasn't working for a big city law firm, and the salary, especially early on, was nowhere near a big city salary. I was working long hours for middle income pay with six-figure student loans on my back. I needed real estate to work out if I wanted to taste financial freedom before the typical retirement age. So I did both as long as I could, worked my day job, and built my portfolio. I accumulated nearly 100 rental units before I left that job. And I did that on purpose because I wanted to build a safety net first. Because diving headlong into real estate with only a couple of dozen units, questionable cash flow, and no consistent income stream is how you end up regretting the very investments that could have set you free. Especially if, like this creator, you haven't even been calculating cash flow correctly to begin with. So no, the problem wasn't rental real estate. The problem was trying to leap into full-time investing before building a stable financial runway. All right, now let's talk about what she says is another big reason for regretting her rentals. Mortgage payments draining all the cash flow.
And I want to give you guys an example. For this 2-unit property that we own that you guys have seen, the upstairs unit is renting for $1,300 a month and the downstairs unit is renting for $1,100 a month. Now for the mortgage on that property, it is roughly $1,300 a month. So that upstairs unit already covers that mortgage, which is amazing. But we still do have utility bill payments on that. So we still cash flow a good amount on that, roughly around the $600 per unit. But still, we have expenses no matter what. But I want you guys to realize that $1,300 from the mortgage payment, that is the principal and interest, which just that part alone consists of $900. And then we have our taxes and insurance, which that's all included within the $1,300 a month. But think about it. That's a big chunk that is coming out of our cash flow. Like, wouldn't it be nice just to have an extra $900 per month in cash flow from just taking away that mortgage?
She's saying we bring in $2,400 per month in rent, and our mortgage is $1,300 per month. So the upstairs rent covers the mortgage. That's amazing. Well, no, that's not amazing. That's a red flag. Let me explain. If your mortgage takes up more than half of your gross rental income and you're not accounting for operating expenses, then whatever number you think cash flow is probably isn't. There's a basic industry rule of thumb, and it holds up in my 14 years of experience across hundreds of rentals. Roughly 50% of a property's gross income will go to operating expenses. Those are all of the same expenses I talked about earlier, and that's before you pay the mortgage. In her case, the property brings in $2,400 per month in rent. If you apply the 50% rule, that means $1,200 per month goes to operating costs. Now layer in her mortgage at $1,300 per month, and she's already at negative cash flow. So no, the problem here isn't that mortgages are bad. The problem is, again, that the property doesn't cash flow. It probably never did. It's not that mortgage ate the cash flow. It's that she bought a bad deal, one where the income wasn't high enough relative to the expenses and debt service. When new investors don't run full cash flow projections, or they ignore the standard operating costs of owning real estate, they end up buying properties that look affordable but financially bleed them dry. So when she says she regrets buying this duplex because the mortgage took up too much of the rent, what she's really saying is, I didn't analyze this deal correctly, and now I'm stuck with a property that was break even at best from the start. That's the real source of the regret. Her last major reason for her regrets, and the one that I actually agree with, is the danger of scaling too fast.
Because I realize it can be easily done where you can buy so many rental properties or just properties in general, whatever you want to do with them, whether that's, fixing them up or keeping them as rental properties. You can do that with no money out of pocket. I mean, that's how we scaled from 0 to 22 units within 18 months. But it's honestly the riskier route if you don't have another source of income, because you slowly get into a hole and you have all these mortgage payments racked up. You have to make sure they're all getting paid, but you also want to make sure that you're getting paid and you're cash flowing as well. So after realizing all this, like I said, I'm done taking that risky route. And I want to take a different approach where I want to focus on limiting those mortgages, having a consistent income, and having a good amount of money in reserves. Because to be honest with you, I'd rather own 30 properties that are 100% paid off than 100 properties that have mortgages on them and only cash flow $300 a door.
And you know what? I get it, because I've lived it. My business partner and I have gone through several phases when we bought 25 to 35 units per year. That kind of growth sounds exciting, and on paper it is, but in practice it's stressful, especially when the growth comes through lots of smaller multifamily deals. Buying a 30-unit apartment complex in one shot is one thing. Buying 4 units, 2 6 units, and a duplex over the course of 1 year is another. You're talking about multiple closings and financing hurdles, more roofs, more furnaces, more tenants, more buildings to manage, and more logistical chaos. And unless you've built out the infrastructure to handle that kind of growth, acquisitions, financing, management systems, maintenance staff, legal, it can absolutely eat you alive. So yes, scaling quickly can be done, but most mom and pop investors are not ready for what it requires behind the scenes. And without enough cash flow to support that growth, it can feel like you're sprinting on a financial treadmill that never slows down. Which is why I actually agree with her conclusion here. Most investors would be better off building a smaller portfolio of properties that are paid off rather than chasing a big leverage rental empire. In fact, I believe it's absolutely possible to retire from your 9-to-5 job with just 5 fully paid off rental properties. If that sounds more your speed, I posted a full breakdown recently on how to get there in 10 years or less, and I'll link to that video in the description. Because in the end, success in real estate isn't about how many doors you have. It's about how much freedom those doors afford you. So to wrap this up, this investor's story isn't uncommon. And I give her a lot of credit for being honest about her experience. But the truth is this: she doesn't regret buying rental properties because rentals don't work. She regrets it because she didn't understand how they work. She misunderstood what cash flow really means. She underestimated the importance of budgeting for repairs and CapEx. She bought deals that didn't truly cash flow. She scaled too fast without the financial or operational systems to support it. And she walked away from consistent income too soon before her investments were ready to carry the full load. If you're watching this and you're new to real estate investing, my message to you is this: rental properties can absolutely change your life, but only if you buy the right ones at the right pace with a clear understanding of the math. You don't need 50 doors. You don't need to quit your job tomorrow. But what you do need is a smart, realistic plan, one that fits your income, your risk tolerance, and your long-term goals. And if you want help with that, I run a free online community called House Hack Mastery. It's filled with new and experienced investors who are building real wealth one smart deal at a time. You can ask questions, get feedback, and even message me directly in the group. The link is in the description, and I'd love to see you in there. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.